Hey guys, my name's Natalie and welcome back to Crime Vlogs Weekly. So this is a case that some of you might recognise because it is quite a popular one on Netflix. It's probably not as well known as Making a Murderer is, but it's something that I certainly wanted to cover on this channel because I know there will be some people who will be interested in hearing about this case. It's the same type of case that is going to leave you questioning whether or not the person blamed for the death is guilty or not, and it's something that I feel a lot of people who were actively involved in the case also thought. This week we're covering the case of the staircase murder. So firstly, I just want to say, if you haven't already watched it, make sure you go and watch the Netflix documentary after you've watched this video because it contains a lot more information, because this is a case that has sort of spanned over like a 16-year period. So there is a lot of back and forth, and you will definitely find yourself yo-yoing between whether or not you believe what is being said. It's just a really good documentary, so I would definitely recommend you watch it. Michael Peterson was born on October the 23rd, 1943 to parents Eugene and Eleanor in Nashville, Tennessee. He graduated from Duke's University with a bachelor's degree in political science. Whilst at university, he was also president of a fraternity, and he also was an editor of the Chronicle, which was a daily student newspaper. He also attended law classes at the University of North Carolina. So he was definitely interested in a mixture of things. He had a variety of interests, much like most of us will have, but it seemed that he gravitated a lot to things that put him in the spotlight, and that you could say that he enjoyed being the centre of attention, that he liked that attention. After he graduated, he got a civilian job at the US Department of Defense. In this job, he was assigned to research arguments that supported the increased military involvement in Vietnam. During this same year, he married a woman called Patricia Sue, and they had two children, Clayton and Todd. In 1968, Michael enlisted himself in the US Marine Corps and served in the Vietnam War. In 1971, however, he received an honourable discharge due to getting in a car accident and being left with a permanent disability. Now, there's not really any information that I can find on the internet about what this permanent disability may be, but I'm guessing it's some form of physical disability, whether that's to do with his arms or his legs, which meant that he could no longer serve in the Marines. Peterson had also said that during his time in the war he received 2 Purple Hearts, but there's no record of this ever being the case. The only medals that he was awarded were the Bronze Star Medal with Valor and the Silver Star Medal. So with all this being said, the accident that he had and lying about the accident being part of the war rather than just a car accident, and the fact that he didn't have these 2 medals means that he has the ability to lie. And of course we all tell the little white lie every now and again, but these are sort of substantial lies. So Michael lived with Patricia in Germany with his 2 children, Clayton and Todd, for some time, and they made friends with Elizabeth and George Ratliff. Elizabeth and George had 2 children, Margaret and Martha, and George sadly passed away, which meant that the families became quite close. And if the death of their father wasn't enough, Elizabeth Ratliff also died in 1985, but this was under suspicious circumstances, which we'll touch on later. As a result, Michael became guardian of the 2 children, Margaret and Martha. Michael and Patricia's marriage ended in 1987, with Patricia remaining in Germany with Clayton and Todd, and Michael had moved over to Durham, North Carolina with Margaret and Martha. Sometime later on, Clayton and Todd would also join their father in North Carolina. Not long after moving to North Carolina, Michael met Kathleen Atwater, and she was a successful Nortel business executive. In 1989, Michael moved in with Kathleen, and they later married in 1997. Kathleen's daughter Caitlin joined the extended family, which now consisted of Clayton, Todd, Margaret and Martha, so quite a mix of a family. On December the 8th, 2001, the night before the following events happened, Michael and Kathleen were spending the evening by the poolside, drinking a few glasses of wine. Now, this is all from Michael's perspective because, as you're about to find out, we don't have Kathleen's available. He said that they had a lovely evening and that Kathleen had turned in to go to bed at around 1:45 to 2 a.m. So they'd spent a good couple of hours outside by the poolside. The weather that evening was quite chilly, so that's a long time to spend outside. But I suppose if you've been drinking, you get that beer jacket, you get nice and cozy, and you might not feel the cold as much. Michael then remained drinking outside sometime until after 2:30, 2:40 a.m, where he went inside and made the grim discovery of Kathleen lying at the foot of the staircase, blood all around her and seemingly unconscious, perhaps even dead. He pretty much called the emergency services straight after he discovered the body, well, when he said he discovered the body, and that he suspected that she had fallen down the stairs after having a mixture of alcohol and Valium, and that she'd fallen some 15 to 20 steps and hit her head on the way, and she was unconscious. Kathleen's blood alcohol content level was at 0.07, which at that point you're going to be slightly impaired. Your reason, memory, self-control is likely going to be compromised, and that your reaction time might also be a lot slower. The autopsy report concluded that Kathleen had sustained several injuries. So this included the fracture of the thyroid neck cartilage and also several lacerations to the back of her head. And these lacerations were consistent with a blow to the head with a blunt object. Ultimately, the cause of death was blood loss from the 90 minutes to 2 hours after sustaining her injuries. So this 90 minutes to 2 hours could factor in the time that Michael was outside, unaware that anything had happened to Kathleen, but also the time in which he discovered her body, called the ambulance got there. Obviously she was unconscious according to Michael during the phone call, and then upon them arriving at the scene, she had died. Now, all of the family, including Kathleen's daughter and her sister, were adamant that Michael was innocent. This was also the case for Michael's children. However, things did change with Kathleen's sister and her daughter when certain things came out about Michael, and also the medical report that was released. As a result, Kathleen's sister and daughter cut ties from the family. As Michael was the only person on the property along with Kathleen, he was immediately the prime suspect, and eventually he would be charged with her murder. He pleaded not guilty, and this is something that he has always maintained to be true. During the trial, a forensic expert, Henry Lee, was brought in on behalf of the defence for Michael Peterson, where he testified that the blood spatter that was caused at the bottom of the staircase was consistent with an accidental fall. However, police concluded that the injuries sustained on Kathleen's body were inconsistent with an accident. There's a lot of footage on the documentary that I recommend you watch, and I'll try and include it in the video here, but it seems like the prosecution were trying really hard to recreate and replicate the blood splatters that was caused at the bottom of the staircase, because they were obviously coming from the point of Michael attacking and beating Kathleen using a blowpoke. The defence also disputed this theory that Michael had beaten Kathleen to death because Kathleen's skull hadn't been fractured and that she hadn't been subjected to any brain damage, which would be inconsistent with a beating. This is a case in trial that got a lot of media attention, especially when Michael's private life started to unravel and emerge, and there were secrets that possibly weren't known prior. It turns out that Peterson was bisexual, and he had been bisexual for some time prior to meeting Kathleen. Now, Michael says that Kathleen knew about this and that they had an open relationship, an open marriage. However, the prosecution believed that Kathleen may have discovered that Michael was bisexual, perhaps even on the night of the murder, and told Michael that she didn't want to be with him anymore and that she wanted a divorce. And now come the theories about what actually happened that night, and some of them are they're a little too far-fetched. The most bizarre one that I find hard to believe is that an owl caused the death of Kathleen. This was because of the lacerations that were caused to her head that could have been consistent with an owl attacking her, and that she also had feathers from an owl on her as well, including something in her hand that was consistent with being from an owl. It was, yeah, a bit bizarre. Another theory was that she lost her footing and that she fell down the stairs. This could be the case if she was intoxicated and she also had taken Valium. You know, her reaction time might not have been as quick as, you know, it normally would be, and she fell down the stairs, hitting her head along the way and knocking herself unconscious. And it might be that she tried to get up. She might have come round, tried to get up and just knocked herself out again, causing more blood loss. And this is something that was mentioned in the documentary. What I seem to remember is that there was quite a pool of blood around her, and that it probably would have been quite easy for her to try and get her footing, you know, coming round and trying to get up again and just falling and slipping and causing more lacerations to the back of her head. There's also a main motive that a lot of murders like this, marital murders especially, take place, and that is down to money. Kathleen had a life insurance policy of 1.5 million, which if everything was, you know, legit, Michael would have been able to claim that back. Coming back to the death of Elizabeth, now this is where it gets questionable for me, because Elizabeth died in very similar circumstances to Kathleen. I mean, it's almost the same circumstances. She had apparently fallen down the stairs, and she was also found at the foot of the stairs in a pool of blood, dead. Coincidence? On October the 10th, 2013, Peterson was found guilty of Kathleen's murder and was sentenced to life without parole. Now, when you receive life without parole means that the murder was premeditated, meaning that he could have planned it days before, or he could have planned it split seconds before actually committing the murder. Peterson would have grounds for appeal just 3 years later, but that appeal didn't materialise into anything. In November of 2008, Peterson had 2 new attorneys represent him, and they filed a motion for a new trial. This was on the basis of the prosecution withholding evidence, the blowpoke, which apparently had not been found. It was missing in the property when the property was searched after the murder, but then magically reappeared, which was really odd. And then there's also the prosecution using expert witnesses where their qualifications had been disputed. But this motion was denied by the Durham County Superior Court. I mean, this guy isn't giving up. He eventually managed to get out of jail on bail. It was a $300,000 bail, and he was under house arrest. This happened because an SBI analyst had falsified information over 34 cases, which included Peterson's case. On February the 24th, 2017, some 16 years after Kathleen's murder, Peterson entered the Alford plea. This is a guilty plea where there's sufficient evidence to convict him of the offence, but that the defendant asserts his innocence. Ultimately, it means that he has to admit to voluntary manslaughter of Kathleen. This is something that really got to him in the documentary. It's something that features in the documentary, and you can tell that it's painful for him to have to toy with this plea, whether he takes it or not, because it is effectively him saying that he had some voluntary role in the manslaughter of his wife. The judge gave him a maximum sentence of 86 months in prison, with credit given to him on his previous time served, which was, I think, around 95 months, so it meant that he didn't have to serve any additional time in prison. Are you confused? Because I certainly am. I am completely and utterly stumped as to whether or not Michael is guilty or not guilty. Of course, there are telling signs that would suggest that he did kill her. The life insurance, for one. There's also the, secret life that he had, whether Kathleen was aware of it or not, that he was bisexual. However, on the other side of things, the documentary really hones in hard with the prosecution and how desperate they were to get a conviction, regardless of how they gathered that evidence in terms of like the recreation of the blood splatter, and then also that SBI analyst who, falsified evidence in many of the cases that he testified in. I do believe there is a world in which Kathleen could have definitely tripped and fell down the stairs and caused those injuries to herself as a result of falling down the stairs. One thing that surprises me is that Michael didn't hear anything. You know, it depends on how far the pool was to the actual house, because I think it was quite a big place. But it surprises me that he didn't hear anything, because, you know, falling down the stairs caused quite a commotion, and you would think that if he did hear it, he would have jolted up and immediately gone in to see what had happened. Particularly as it was also very late at night, it would have been quite quiet. And then there's also this argument of the weather being quite bitterly cold that time of year. But then again, like I mentioned earlier, when you've had alcohol and you've been drinking quite a bit of alcohol, you do develop that sort of, you know, sense of being warm and maybe not feeling the cold as much. I don't know, it's a weird one, guys. If you've not watched the documentary, I highly recommend it, because I can promise you, you will be gripped from beginning to end. Do let me know in the comments what you think about this case, making sure to let me know of any research that I've missed, anything that's come to light recently that I might have missed as well. Make sure you also let me know what cases you'd like me to cover in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel, clicking the bell notification just below to get notified of when I will post my next videos. And I'll see you guys next week. Bye, guys.